Daniel Andrews is the Premier of Victoria and he spoke to me earlier. Premier Daniel Andrews, thanks for joining me.
Thanks for having us on, Virginia.
Now, Victoria was close to eliminating this virus back in April. What's been your government's biggest mistake?
Well, look, we find ourselves in a situation where we've got unsustainably high numbers of cases. There's a hotel quarantine issue that's being looked at by a former judge. That's the appropriate thing to do. The key point is we've got a pause on those returning travellers. They're not coming to Melbourne for a period of 2 weeks. That may need to be extended, Virginia, while we reset that program and have complete confidence in the new arrangements under Corrections Victoria's leadership. But all of us did not want to be in this place. We did not want to have a situation where a second wave was upon us, but we can't pretend that the reality we face isn't real. It's all too real. The risks are high, and that's why we've had to make these very difficult decisions.
But is the responsibility equally shared between the community, what we have done and haven't done, and the state government, or is the greater burden of responsibility on you?
I'd put it to you very clearly, Virginia, the greatest burden of responsibility is with me. I'm the leader of the government. I'm the leader of the state. For almost 6 years now, I've never walked away from that. That's a big and important part of the job that I do. And on that basis, I have to be, and I am completely motivated to get this done, to fix this, to get those numbers as stable as we can and then drive them down. But obviously the accountability for everything that goes on in our pandemic response ultimately sits with me. That's the job that I've got, and that's the job that I'm focused on doing.
Yesterday on this program, the epidemiologist Tony Blakely told us that if it wasn't for the quarantine hotel breaches, Victoria would not be in this mess right now. So what was your reasoning for using 3 private security firms to secure them? And before you explain again about the judicial inquiry, I'm just asking here about your reasoning, which of course isn't dependent on the outcome of that inquiry. So can you tell us that?
I understand the question, and the question might be fine in the context of a judicial inquiry, but the answer can't be, I'm afraid, Virginia. I'm not going to sit in judgment of myself. Politicians should not be sitting in judgment of themselves.
No, but you can tell us your thinking.
Well, indeed, every effort was made to try and have the best arrangements in place. Clearly, there have been some individuals, maybe a larger group than just some individuals, who have behaved in a completely unacceptable way. That's a fact. That'll have to be worked through in terms of the work that former Judge Coate is doing. That answer is not to avoid the ultimate accountability for this. I'm very clear with you and your viewers and all Victorians. I'm the leader of the state. I'm the leader of the government. And ultimately I'm accountable for what goes on in this pandemic response and in all things.
But if we're going to succeed with this second lockdown, an unprecedented second lockdown, if other states, for example, are not going to have our problems too, Premier, we need to spell this out. It's not looking backwards, it's accurately designing the way forward. So what was your thinking for not using ADF personnel in the quarantine hotels?
Well, I think it's really important, Virginia, to make this point. ADF personnel have been involved in some other states, not all, in transporting people from the airplane they get off to the hotel that they'll be staying at. That's not where our problem has been. Our problem has been in the other quarantine arrangements at the actual hotel where people have been staying. So I don't think that's a relevant factor. What is important, though, to your point about, well, we need to understand and then we need to reset, that's exactly what we're doing now. That's why Corrections Victoria, the people who run our jails, under the direct supervision, the direct command and control and management of the Corrections Commissioner here in Victoria, that's who is ultimately in charge now. That reset, it can be done because we've got that pause, we've got that gap of a couple of weeks with no flights coming back to Melbourne. We may need to take a little longer than that 2-week period. I've written to the Prime Minister and asked him, or at least given him some warning that may be the position we get to. Obviously, we've got a lot to deal with at the moment with positive cases, contact tracing, all that other work. I suppose the clearest point to make is Corrections Victoria are in there now and they're running it using the skills they have. And I think that's the most appropriate thing to do as we reset this program.
But if that situation was a failure then, and it's universally acknowledged that it was in that way, why are those 3 private security firms still involved in that hotel quarantine in some capacity now?
Well, again, without cutting across what will ultimately be the judgment of others, I think we've got subcontracting arrangements that may be part of this. Some contracting arrangements may be part of this. The individuals involved, anybody thought to have been involved in any inappropriate behaviour has no involvement no involvement in our hotel quarantine.
But you say, I'm sorry to jump in there, Premier, but you say may. Are you not sure? Are you not sure if those subcontracted firms are involved or not?
No, I'm saying that the subcontracting and contracting may well have been contributing factors to what we saw, the conduct that we saw. Again, those matters will have to be properly and appropriately addressed, not by a member of the government sitting in judgment on ourselves, but a proper inquiry under an Act of Parliament well distant from government. The point I'm making to you is that individuals who've been involved in any sense of any individual involved in anything that was not appropriate, they are not part of our pandemic response. This program is being reset. Staff are being employed directly by the Department of Justice, and they will report as an employee to the people who run our jails, to the Corrections Victoria Commissioner, and that's the most appropriate way to go. The reset that is possible because we've got that 2-week period where we don't have more flights coming, and as I've said, that may need to be longer. That's the most important thing that we have to absolutely focus on, getting this right.
Melbourne has 47 public housing towers. 9 are in that lockdown state now. So what are authorities doing for residents in the other 38 towers?
There's a whole range of deep cleaning that's going on. There's been a complete double checking, if you like, of all the different processes. That deep cleaning and other hand sanitisers, other things that have occurred, they've been occurring for quite some time. But this is always going to be a very challenging environment. Any community where people live close together, particularly where you've got shared facilities, laundries, foyers, limited number of lifts, any high-rise, whether it be it doesn't really matter who the landlord is, Virginia, it's always going to be a challenging environment. That's why people are redoubling their efforts, working with community leaders, working with residents to make sure that we keep them safe and well. Again, this was not an easy choice, but there was a clear one. The alternative, which would have been perhaps more pleasant in the short term, but ultimately would have meant more and more people had the virus, more and more people would have been gravely ill, and then the tragedy that follows from that. I wasn't prepared to make an easier judgment, perhaps a more popular one. You've got to get on and get these things done. We'll be accountable. I'm accountable for that decision and every other decision. We want to get these people out of this hard lockdown. I want those residents to get back to being on the same footing as every other person across Melbourne. Getting the test results is the critical step toward that.
So just quickly and finally, Premier, will this lockdown work?
Look, I am confident because our Chief Health Officer, our health experts are confident that this 6-week stay-at-home lockdown will mean that we can stabilise numbers, drive them down and get back to a place where we can start opening up again. It'll only work, though, if we all work together. I'm focused on that and I want all Victorians to be.
Daniel Andrews, thanks for joining us tonight.
Thanks very much, Virginia.